Everybody please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on the agenda is public comments. Do we have any public comments this evening? Okay. No public comments tonight. Second item is acceptance of minutes. The minutes of January 5th, 2016. Move to accept and approve the minutes of January 5th, 2016, as shown. Have a second.
Second.
Any comments on the minutes of January 5th? No comments. All in favor of accepting the minutes? 5. Item 3 is the correspondence. Items A through Q. Move to accept and approve the list of correspondences as shown, A through Q. Have a second.
Second.
Timothy? Any comments on the correspondence this week? You have no comments? All in favor of accepting the correspondence? Okay. Number 4, the consent agenda. A repeat one-day liquor license for Oars. Move to accept and approve the consent item as shown. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Do have a comment.
Comments?
Is anybody here representing?
No, Julia could not be here tonight, so this is a repeat. She will have a full detail. It's March 30th, so you have a liquor license that would grant you alcohol delivery on the 29th and return any unopened alcohol on the 31st.
How many people were there last year? Like, what was the crowd?
It's a cello.
Every year.
Cello?
Yeah, every year it's a cello.
What does the cello consist of at the Fine Arts Theater?
I want to say it's about 550.
Really?
You haven't attended?
I've never thought about how many people could fit in there, actually. I have attended the theater, but not this. So 550 people, that's excellent.
Glass of wine will do it.
Okay. No, that's the only comment. I just wanted a little clarification. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this item? Anybody? No? Okay. All those in favor of accepting and approving this license? 5. Thank you. Okay. Just one second. Okay, item number 5, interview and appointments for the Maynard Police Department, Patrick Brennan and Trista Mancuso. So I'll read the motion and then we'll go on to the rest. Move to accept and approve Patrick Brennan and Trista Mancuso to the Maynard Police Department with indefinite terms. Do we have a second?
Second.
Tim. Okay, comments? Chief?
Well, I wasn't sure if you were going to...
Re-update us on exactly what we're... Hold on.
Okay. As you recall from the last meeting, Patrick and Trista are essentially getting promoted to police officer from dispatcher positions. They're currently in the police academy. They have 8 weeks left to go. I attached kind of a summary of what they've done since they've been appointed as dispatchers for the last 18 months here in Maynard. And then I attached a copy of their resume that they submitted when they were hired as dispatchers. So it just goes back prior to when they began working for the police department. They're both special police officers already, excellent employees. Command staff was very excited to get them into the academy and get them appointed and fill the 2 open positions that we currently have. So they're here for any questions you have for them, or if I wasn't sure if that's what you were going to do. So
Okay.
that's the summary.
All right.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, Patrick.
What's there?
How you doing? Don't call me sir anymore. All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Trista and Patrick?
How's Academy going?
It's going good.
Sir, good,
Graduate?
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Got about 8
left.
weeks left.
How many?
8.
8 weeks?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Kevin, do you have any questions?
I
for
don't.
either?
I commend you. I'm very excited to have people local that want to step in and be part of the Maynard Police Force. Chief explained all the benefits last week, 2 weeks ago actually, of why it's important to have local people, stepping into these roles versus, people who may have a different idea of why they're taking a role in Maynard, right? So it's important, and I sort of understand where he was coming from now, so I'm excited about the prospect of people being close to home and they have a direct impact on where they live as well as where they work. So I commend you. It's an honorable profession, obviously, so, and thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
David?
No, I just, I wish you both luck.
Sir.
Congratulate you both on your, obviously I anticipate you'll successfully complete your final 8 weeks and we'll be on the street here in Maynard very soon, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you,
very
sir.
much, sir.
Jason?
No, nothing else. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I can tell you, Patrick, haven't known you since you were about 4.
Yes,
I think that's when your sister would have been in kindergarten, so I'm happy for you and I'm happy for your parents. I know they must be happy to see you, in town and doing what you want to do, so that's a good
Yes,
thing. And
sir.
Trista, the chief, and I interviewed Mike Noble on the side, and everybody speaks very highly of both of you guys. So
Thank you very much,
I'm excited to have you guys and personally vote to appoint you. And so I will now ask everybody else for their opinion, and all those in favor of appointing Patrick and Trista to the Maynard Police Department. Congratulations. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Finish strong.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Your appointment's supposed to be in the town clerk's office tomorrow after 10 a.m.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
The interesting part of all that is in 2 weeks, if I get pulled over for speeding, I'll have to call him sir.
Don't call her
So we got
sir,
that going.
Chris.
Anyways, well, that's a good thing. So, on to Haley Fritz and Jack McKeon for Girl Scout Gold Award Project.
The Historical Commission is quite pleased to sponsor Ambassador Girl Scout Haley Fritz for her Gold Award project. And what I'm presenting you now is one of the major
Careful.
parts of Thank you.
This should work by going back and forth. If it doesn't, you can just click left on the mouse and that'll work.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Haley, can you just for those of us that aren't aware of exactly what the Girl Scout Gold Award is, can you just tell us what that is quick?
Of course. So the Girl Scout Gold Award is the highest award in Girl Scouting. It's comparable to the Eagle Scout, although it's slightly different. It's an 80-hour sustainable community service project, and the part that Girl Scouts likes to, I guess, tout as especially important is the sustainability. It's what sets it apart from the Eagle Scout and makes it truly unique. It has to be able to endure.
Okay.
So, as you know, my name is Haley Fritz. I'm a senior at Maynard High School and a Girl Scout. I'm here to talk about my Gold Award project. Jack just handed to you the handbooks that I created as part of this project. For those of you who aren't aware, I've been working on sort of a twofold project. I talked about this in my letter that I think you read, but the project begins with the handbook. It's sort of guide to historic preservation, the various processes and levels, and I'll be going over those in my presentation. But the other part is a series of children's scavenger hunts. There's 2 levels. They utilize, or one of them utilizes smartphone technology for the older kids, and I'm hoping to integrate those as part of a yearly event. So I'll talk about that at the end of my presentation. But that worked. To get into the meat of my presentation, I'm going to start with an introduction to what historic preservation is. This is truly very basic, but there are many benefits to historic preservation. You probably all know what historic preservation is, but you might not necessarily think about why it's important. There are obviously community benefits that are social and cultural. It brings people together. It brings people, especially in a town like Maynard, closer to their families, because many people have lived here their entire lives and go back many generations, especially with the mill. It contributes to our sense of town pride. Our history is truly what has shaped our society and made our way of life today, and a lot of people feel that we should honor that, and I agree. But there are also economic benefits, so historic preservation is very practical. The unique, storefronts and buildings that are provided by historic properties are ideal locations for businesses. They're very special, and a lot of businesses are attracted to that, I think. And another thing that is very practical about it is that the rehabilitation of older buildings allows us to reuse properties that might otherwise just get wasted. So it's very environmentally and economically efficient. So there are many words that are used sort of interchangeably to describe preservation. I listed them on the screen, but they have slightly different shades of meaning, but they all boil down to one point, which is that they want to maintain and ensure the future of historic properties. So to get into what I wrote about in my handbook, I will start by talking about the national level of preservation and work my way down the hierarchy. So to begin, the highest level of historic preservation in the United States is the Department of the Interior. It is led by the Secretary of the Interior. They establish a lot of guidelines, which are they're mostly important if you're hoping to apply for federal assistance or sometimes state assistance. They hope that you abide by these guidelines that they set out so that you can truly honor the mission of the Department of the Interior, and so that if they're going to support you, they're putting their support behind someone that they trust. But the most important and most visible thing that they do is overseeing the National Park Service. The National Park Service is probably the most famous in America form of historic preservation. It's run by the Department of the Interior, as I mentioned, and they administer 2 very important pieces of historic preservation programming. One is the National Historic Preservation Act, and what that basically did is that established all the lower level programs in the states, as well as a special fund to fund those programs. The other thing that they do that's important is the National Register of Historic Places. And you might know this, but in Maynard we have one National Register property, and that is Glenwood Cemetery. It's honored for its archaeological possibilities and for the fact that many important people in town were buried there. But basically all the National Register is that it's an honorary designation for these historic sites. It doesn't guarantee their protection or salvation in the event of a threat, but it does help to bring publicity and awareness and to give that honor to the site. The National Park Service also offers economic benefits, which are especially important if you're hoping to attract a private developer to a historic site. They offer tax credits for both historic and old buildings. And there's a slight difference between historic versus old. A historic property tends to have some significance in way of being tied to an event or a time or a person or maybe an artistic style, whereas an old building would simply date back to many, many years ago. The National Trust for Historic Preservation is another level of national preservation. It's not a branch of the government. It's a nonprofit. It was a branch of the government, but now it's branched off and become its own private entity. So it administers the National Treasures Program. The National Treasures Program recognizes threatened historic sites on their website and invites people to donate. It's basically PR-based. They also offer grants of up to $5,000, and that may be used only for planning and educational outreach programs, not for physical reconstruction or rehabilitation of a building. So that's where those small shades of meaning of those words that I listed before come in. But those are basically pre-preservation or post-preservation projects that those grants can be used for. The next level of historic preservation is state preservation, which really begins in Massachusetts with the Mass Historical Commission. And that's headed by the Secretary of the Commonwealth, William Galvin. They administer a lot of programs and grants, 2 whole slides worth, in fact. So to begin, the first program that they administer is called Certified Local Governments Program. I think that's administered by Christopher Skelly. And basically towns that meet the state standards for preservation can get more assistance in ways of grants and other things that aren't accessible to every town government. There's also the State Register of Historic Places, very similar to the National Register in that it's a purely honorary designation within the state that doesn't guarantee you any legal protection, but it is very beneficial. Excuse me. There's also MACRIS, which is an online database of many historic sites, including more than 400 from Maynard, which I think is very awesome. And they also offer a lot of financial assistance in the way of grants. So they have the Preservation and Projects Planning Funds. That's pre-preservation money that can't be used, again, for rehabilitation or reconstruction. And that's only for state register properties. So already you can see the benefits of having that designation, even if it's only honorary. There's also the Cultural Facilities Fund. Some of these grants you might have to compete with properties that aren't necessarily historic. This is one of those grants because it's applicable to all cultural properties that are owned by a nonprofit and made accessible to the public. But if it is historic, I think that gives it a little extra edge if you're competing for this type of grant. There's also a planning and survey grant program. It's a 50-50 matching grant, and it's another one that goes toward pre-preservation projects, such as if you're completing something like a nomination for a National Register designation, those tend to get expensive because they require that you perform a lot of studies and, present a lot of research prior to the project to prove that it's worthy. They also offer tax credits like the federal government for privately owned National Register properties. So already, again, the benefits of having that designation. Preservation Massachusetts is another nonprofit on the state level. They further preservation efforts throughout the state with many programs, such as the Most Endangered Historic Resources Program. That's PR-based advocacy, much like the National Treasures Program on the national level. There's also a pre-development loan fund, which is toward those third-party costs, such as studies, consultants, etc. There's the Preservation Circuit Riders Program, which we've actually had experience with in Maynard because one of the circuit riders, her name was Stacia Kaplanson, she came to work with the Coolidge Reuse Task Force Committee. And basically those are part-time preservation professionals. They're sponsored by Preservation Massachusetts, and they come and assist with things like studies that have to be done prior to performing any kind of research, or in the case of the Coolidge Reuse Task Force Committee, making those special recommendations for the building. There's also the Community Preservation Coalition, which is headed by Preservation Massachusetts, but it's a group of many organizations throughout the state, and they enforce CPA, which is the Community Preservation Act. And I'll talk about that in the next level of preservation, which is the closest to home, local preservation. I would argue that this is probably the most important level. So I'm here sponsored by the Maynard Historical Commission. I work with them very closely on my Gold Award project, very supportive and very easy to work with. But they've done a lot of really special things throughout town, I think. It's important to note I listed some of their roles and responsibilities, but I won't go through them because you've probably worked with them before, obviously. But it's important to note that I wrote that they do not have regulatory or legislative authority within town government. However, I'm going to get into some bylaws that we don't have in Maynard that you could pass, and in those cases, if you were to establish something like a review committee or some type of review that needs to happen before those bylaws can come into effect for a certain property, then the Historical Commission might be given, through that law, special regulatory authority, only in those laws. So normally they might not have that authority, but they would in the case of a special bylaw like that. They have a lot of programs throughout town, such as the historic markers and plaques, the walking tours, and of course they've been my partner in completing this project. So I mentioned the Community Preservation Act. That's a very important piece of legislation in town, especially in Maynard, because it's been used for a lot of projects, including the restoration of the Glenwood Cemetery fence. And like I said, that's a special property because it's our only National Register property in this town. But it's actually a statewide act, and Maynard adopted it in 2006. It created a community preservation committee which reviews and funds projects using state allocated money for this piece of legislation. And the funds can be used for a number of things, not just historic preservation. So again, you have some competition, but I think, again, having that historical background for a site gives it a little extra edge in that competition. So basically, proposals for these projects have to be presented at a town hearing and voted on at a town meeting, meaning that it's incredibly important to have public support for any type of preservation project if you're hoping to get CPA funding or any type of funding, really. So I talked about the fact that I would be listing some bylaws that we don't have in Maynard currently, but that we could have. And this is one of those bylaws. So historic districts can be enacted in one of two ways. If it's a National Register district, it's enacted actually by the Mass Historical Commission, and local government has nothing to do with it. I'm going to focus on a local historic district, which would be enacted by the town government. Historic districts work best if they are placed in an area where a lot of houses or a lot of properties are historic and grouped together in a similar style. In these districts, basically all the changes or new construction in that area have to be reviewed by a committee before they can go into effect, which protects the historic character of that district. So there are many steps to enacting a historic district. Basically, you have to have approval on every level, and I think that's important to show how the different levels of preservation cooperate with one another. Another type of bylaw that's used prevalently is a preservation deed restriction. It's used interchangeably with the term easement. That was a little tricky for me to figure out because I was getting really confused when I was doing research thinking, what's an easement? Eventually I learned they were the same thing. So they're preservation restrictions that are written into the deed of a specific property. You cooperate with the property owner, with the Mass Historical Commission, and with the local government who enforces it. It's basically, what you do is you would say there's a certain aspect of the character of the building that you don't want changed, or maybe an overall feeling, or maybe it's just the outside, maybe it's just a feature on the inside. Basically, you might stipulate that you can't change that specific feature, and it passes on to future property owners. So it's especially effective because it facilitates transitions in ownership, especially from public to private or private to public, etc. Another type of bylaw that's used really commonly is a demolition delay bylaw. And they are popular because they delay the demolition of a building that's historic for 6 to 18 months so that you can explore an alternative. It's important to note that it cannot stop or prevent or ban the demolition of the building. It can only delay it for a certain period of time. So it's especially important that if you're going to put that into, if you're going to enact this piece of legislation and put it into effect in a specific case, that you need to be constantly promoting alternatives. You need to be working hard during that delay period to make sure that the property owner is going to change his course. Basically, after permits filed, the Historical Commission would be given regulatory authority in this case, and they would review the permit, do some research on the building, decide if it's historic. If it is historic, a public hearing is held, and the Historical Commission has to vote whether or not to enact the delay. If a delay is enacted, then the property owner cannot demolish the building during that period of time. And after that period of time, it's up to them what they can do. But basically, the goal is to convince them to do something different, and public support is really important in that. Which sort of segues me into the next part of preservation. I talked a lot about how the government is involved in preservation, but also private entities are very important as well. And I shared a quote on this slide that I thought was very special and sort of summed it up in a little nutshell. The property rights of private owners have to be shared with the public. We like to think of, I think movies and things like that tend to characterize private developers as these evil human beings who want to just destroy all this historic property. And really, they're people like everyone else, and I think that they can be cooperated with and worked with. And it's important for the public to work with the private. So one way in which that's done in the case of a historic building is adaptive reuse. Private developers can cooperate with the public to preserve a historic building by reusing those old buildings instead of new construction. And it's more sustainable to do that because it's environmentally friendly, it's economic because you aren't paying to build a new building, you're just paying to refurbish an old one. And it's culturally sustainable because the public is happy with you. They're more likely to support you because you're not threatening historic properties, you're actually aiding them. And another interesting thing is that to do a lot of historic preservation, you have to invest in the original source that the materials came from, especially if you have something like a preservation deed restriction that says that you have to preserve these original materials. You have to go to the original source of the material. And that means that local businesses are getting funded and getting invested in. But sometimes with adaptive reuse, private developers run into obstacles, and that's where these types of bylaws come in. They're drafted by the planning board and passed at town meeting. Basically an adaptive reuse zoning bylaw. So buildings are zoned for a specific purpose. A building might be commercial, residential, etc. But in the case of adaptive reuse, a private developer might want to use a special historic building. They might see something in that building, a feature that's especially perfect for a certain use. It might be zoned for residential use, but they might say, oh, this would make a great restaurant. So basically what this bylaw allows the town to do is expand the possible uses for the building so that the private developer has more options. And that promotes the reuse of buildings rather than new construction in different areas of town. As I said before, it's really important that the public works with the private. And one legal way in which they can do that is by forming a public-private partnership, which is a form of contract. It's a long-term contract entered between a town government and a private developer, often in the case of a historic property. And basically, the public's in charge of the service being offered, but they transfer the management of that service to the developer so that they can sort of take a hands-off approach while still offering the same service that they were offering before. Basically, the private developer offers management, they can offer new solutions, innovation, special business expertise, and money, of course, capital. And the government can regulate and protect the building's historic character and garner public support for the private developer's project. And sometimes a third party might enter the agreement. They're called an NGO, but they basically they take more of a passive role in the process. They just share ownership of the building, provide historic expertise, or they might just be there to hold other parties accountable in their agreement. And the reason why it's so important that private development is promoted in historic properties rather than just new construction is that there are many economic benefits that are beneficial both to the developer and the town. Historic designations such as National Register, State Register, etc., increase property values in town, which is important for taxes and things like that, obviously. And it can also protect a property from fluctuations in the housing market, meaning the value might become stable instead of going up or down. Newer construction in historic districts especially, or near other historic buildings, depreciates the value of those buildings. Basically, if all the buildings around you are in the same style, it increases the value of the property for whatever reason. Federal tax credits provide an incentive for developers to come in, build their business, and more revenue for the town and for them. Historic sites can draw tourism for the town, which is really important because there's a growing type of tourism called heritage tourism. People are becoming more and more interested in going back to see their roots, their family, the history of our nation, whatever. And that's a big draw. If you have a preserved property that's historic, you can draw tourists. Newer businesses like small startups really seem to like the charm of older buildings. They think they're cute or quaint, and they like to build their business there because it has something special, it has character. And finally, the rehabilitation of historic storefronts attracts customers. If there's a rotting historic building sitting next to a pretty new one, it's not going to be good for business to the building next to it. So renovating those storefronts that are historic is actually very beneficial to business in town, and I know how much Maynard loves small business. So the final level of preservation is the lowest level and the most accessible to the public, grassroots preservation. And that would be strategies such as used by nonprofits, used by individuals like me, my Gold Award project, things like social media, newsletters, email campaigns, coming to meetings like this. You might have a small group of friends that pickets outside the lawn of something that's going to get demolished, anything like that. And there are also events. So in town we have Maynard Fest, and I am proposing a new event called Founders Day. As I mentioned before, I created the historic scavenger hunts, and after discussing it with the Maynard Historical Commission, we determined that the most efficient way was to make it an annual event. We thought about having them up year-round, but it really wasn't sustainable, and that was an important part of my Gold Award project, was that it would be able to come back every year. So I talked to Mark Malcolm at the Maynard Public Library, and he said that after I graduate, he would be willing to take over that event, but I really wanted to see it get bigger than just a simple scavenger hunt over the weekend. We don't currently have a town holiday to honor our Founders Day, and I think that we should. So April 27th was the date of the first Maynard Town Charter, and I think that that's a great day to honor, but obviously we want to push it to the weekend so that we can have these celebrations. So I propose that the annual town holiday to honor Maynard's history should be held on the Saturday nearest April 27th. And I listed many various reasons why. In addition to aiding my Gold Award project, there's also the town history hasn't been honored yet. There's a sense of community pride, and it's something new for you as selectmen. You would be the ones remembered for proposing and implementing this holiday. There's also an opportunity for education for children, for adults even, who might not know these things about our town history that we do. There's economic business benefits for local businesses. Last week I met with the Maynard Business Alliance. They're throwing their full support behind me. They're going to help me get in touch with local businesses who might want to offer services or discounts during the event. And also our Sesquicentennial is coming up. So this is a great way to, starting this event every year is a great way to get people thinking about town history prior to that big day. And finally, like I said before, this will really help my Gold Award project, and that's the root of why I'm here. But thank you for your time, and if you have any questions about what I've proposed or what I've said, please let me know. Thank you again.
Have any questions?
Sure. How long did it take you to put together this report? It's very, very thorough.
So the whole project overall, I don't have the breakdown of how much time I spent on the handbook versus the scavenger hunts, but so far I have 76 hours and counting. Most Gold Award projects get to 100. They get far past the 80-hour minimum.
Okay. Wow. I was actually taking notes down here because you present better than half the people that try to sell me stuff every day in my real job.
Thank you.
So that's actually a really good quality to have. One of the things that was interesting is, did you come up with Founders Day on your own, or was it something that you thought about with the aid of the historical committee as well to get some background, or?
I thought about Founders Day, but we thought about the annual concept of my scavenger hunt as a group. So from that, I sort of branched off it and was thinking about, I tend to think on a very grand scale. It's my personality, so.
All right. Great. No, I on the surface, it's a fabulous idea. I mean, what else can you say about that? Especially if you have it in the warm weather. People like to get outside and do things in a small town, so. I'm very pleased that you didn't say, hey, we could add it to the Maynard Fest or something like that, because that would be a little bit overwhelming, I think, for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But very impressive presentation. I commend you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tim?
No, this was very impressive. You came up with this with the help of others. Having found out a lot about this stuff myself recently, it's enlightening. I hope it benefits others as well. Definitely outside the box project. It's a great idea.
Thank you.
Dave? David?
I echo Terrence's comments about your presentation. I guess in many ways it's reflective not only of yourself, but also of the education that we have here at Maynard. And those of people that are watching at home will understand that Maynard education is valuable because you're a product of it. So thank you, and continue with that. Do you have an interest in going into history or something like that in college?
Actually, political communication.
Same thing, basically.
Yeah.
You just present it.
Yeah.
I am supportive of your idea. I think it's, I think it's great that you worked with the Historical Commission and got their support. And it's a great group of people down there that are very interested and care so much about our community. So you were with the right crowd. So I congratulate you, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Making this a reality.
Jason?
I'm going to continue to sing your praises
on your presentation skills and
you.
just having read through your letter and your report. It's better than things that I've seen prepared professionally, unfortunately, for those folks and not for you. When do you think Maynard could try to at least start with a Founder's Day? Were you thinking in the near future or in the next few years? Or?
I would ideally like it to be this year because, as I mentioned, I'm a graduating senior, and if I want to be involved in the first year, then this is truly my last chance. May is the deadline for my Gold Award project, so this is really the final event to round it out. But if it isn't possible this year, I can still earn the Gold Award. It's not completely contingent on this, but I would ideally like to see it done this year.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the education. This was one of the best presentations we've had in the time that I've been sitting here, I can tell you that. And you're in good hands with the folks sitting behind you. I have two things for you to do. First one is, take this presentation that you gave us, see Andrew, and bring it to the Maynard Economic Development Council. Because those are the people who are, dealing with the buildings that you talk about, and the buildings next door to a lousy building, next to a nice building, and you can share that with them if you have time and if they're willing. The second thing is, if you work with Jack and the folks behind you, right, and you come up to us in time to do something for Founders Day this year, we'll have a Founders Day this year. But if we do, you have to give the opening speech. And you have to represent the Board of Selectmen on Founders Day in 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you. And good luck with your award. Thank you, Jack.
Kind of raised the bar.
You guys got to follow that now, so.
Good luck, gentlemen.
You just saw was all of these works.
Well, there he goes.
Okay. 7, 8, and 9, I believe, are all you
Mr.
guys.
Chair, we have representatives from Stantec joining us. I think Victor Olson, is Victor taking the lead on, or?
I'll take the lead.
All right, great. Chris and Wayne and Miko.
Wait, I'll sign this and just pass it to Becky.
Yeah, I think.
Timothy.
What book? This one?
All right, so if you want to lead us off,
Sure.
the first agenda item is sort of the culmination of a project that we've had under the works with regards to the Hayes Street drain pipe investigation, and I'll turn it over to representatives from Stantec to talk about the work they've been doing post the recent hearing we had and sort of next step process.
Great,
Turn over.
thanks, Kevin. My name is Gary McCarthy with Stantec. With me today is Victor Olson, also with Stantec, and Doug Gardner is with us as well. Doug's a sub-consultant for us. He's a municipal finance expert, runs his own firm, and we work with Doug with a lot of our clients handling the financial part of our projects. So what I'd like to do is, would it be okay, Kevin, if we reshuffled a little bit the
Yeah.
topics?
Mr. Chair, you have an issue with, you want to take it out of order?
A little bit out of order.
Whatever
okay?
order, just as long as we know where you are, we're good.
Okay. So I'll give a little overview of what we'll talk about. I'll give a couple of minutes on the rules and regulations, both water and sewer. And then we'll have Doug talk a little bit about the rates and the fees and charges that we're proposing as part of those rules and regulations. And then I was going to hand it to Victor, and Victor was going to talk about Hayes Street first. We've done some investigation there, and we have some recommendations for some improvements to that drainage system. And secondly, Victor is going to talk about a project that we started a few years back. It's a 5-year investigation of infiltration and inflow. It's one of the requirements of your MPDS discharge permit from the wastewater plant. And so we just completed our 2nd year of that investigation, and just starting now our 3rd year of that investigation. So we thought it'd be a good time for us to give you a summary of where we're at on that effort, and Victor will handle that part of it. So I'll get started on the rules and regulations. In front of you, you have 2 separate documents, water rules and regulations and sewer rules and regulations. And Chris asked us to take a look at those for you. We've done a similar effort for other clients of ours, municipal clients of ours, where we take a look at their, basically the town DBW bylaws and help them to make sure that they're complete, that they address the issues that typically come up with these 2 topics, water and sewer. You have current water rules and regulations in place. That was initially accepted by the town in June of 2007. So we basically took that document and supplemented what we thought might be helpful to strengthen the document. The sewer rules and regulations are not, you don't have an existing rules and regulations at this point. The document that we reviewed was one that Chris had started to put together over the past year or so. And again, we took that format, and we didn't want to rewrite it, but we wanted to review it and supplement, and that's what we did. On the water rules and regulations, you'll find in the back we added some standard details that are typical for the construction of some of these components of those systems. We included the existing policies that are in place regarding shut-off of the water system, either due to non-payment or to violation of the rules and regs. We added forms, typical forms that a contractor or a developer or a homeowner would need in order to apply for water service or sewer service. And we did added similar components to the sewer rules and regulations as well. One other thing that we did look at and updated was in the authority. You as the Board of Selectmen are basically, you also stand as the water commissioners and the sewer commissioners. And so in the authority portion of these documents, we updated some of the more recent Mass General laws that give you additional authority or strengthen the authority that you have playing that role as water and/or sewer commissioner. So those are the basics. I'm obviously here tonight to answer any specific questions you may have on the documents themselves. I can ask Doug maybe just spend just a minute talking about the rates and charges that are as appendices in those 2 documents, and then we'd be happy to answer questions on either one of those. Want to take it, Doug?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Doug Gardner, and as Gary mentioned, Pioneer Consulting is my firm. I'm a water and sewer rate consultant. municipal finance and accounting. And with the rates and charges, I just wanted to make it known that we did not conduct a rate study. We're not offering any opinion or any recommendations to the water rates or the sewer rates. We strictly focused our efforts on the what is described as other charges. So services provided to customers that are not flow related. And I'll start with water. We did a comprehensive review, and we're making recommendations, increases to some costs are maintained. I don't believe anything went down. And then we also looked for other sources where you were providing services where a fee was not being recouped. And, you're a municipal organization. Basic services are provided to the customer, but there are services that you provide that are unique to a customer. And according to the American Water Works, those charges should be recouped. And that's what we did for you and for this study. The costs were based on, or the charges were calculated based on the average rate that you pay your employees, plus factoring in a percentage for fringe benefits, retirement costs, health insurance costs, other insurance costs. That all factors into what you pay your employees and what needs to be recouped. We also looked at a vehicle charge. So I think, probably the easiest way to go through this is just to address the charges one by one, and I can move through it pretty quickly. They're all calculated in the same basic manner, as I mentioned, based on the hourly rate of the employees. But one area I wanted to focus on is something that's called private fire protection. That is a service that's unique mostly to businesses. If you look, I'm not sure if this building has a sprinkler system, but like over a clock tower place, there's a dedicated line that comes off the main that is for firefighting purposes only. If there's a fire in the building, the sprinkler goes off, the water helps knock the fire down. That service is not metered, and the water is not paid for if there is a fire. So what most communities do is they have what's known as a private fire connection fee, and that's an annual charge based on the size of the connection at the main, and it primarily for businesses. And we're recommending that the smallest connection size is going to be a 4-inch connection. Currently, your charge is $0. We're recommending $200, and then for every inch connection would be another $50. And they usually go in 2-inch increments, so 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, etc. So we're starting off with $200 for the 4-inch connection, and recommending up to $500 for a 10-inch connection. The next category would be cross-connection testing. Currently, that is provided by a subcontractor, but there are still costs borne by the DPW. The test has to be set up through the office. Paperwork is filed by the office, so there's time involved. Those costs should be passed along to the business that has the cross-connection device. Currently, you charge $0. We're recommending an increase to $35. That's over and above what the private contractor charges. All the other charges, I assume you have a copy